morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kev. For the next 2 hours, I'm coming to you live from the smart city of Glasgow in the heartland of Scotland. And you know what comes next? We go all the way to Australia, up to Alaska, over to Norway, back to Nebraska, and who only knows where else. And we do that thanks to Truth Frequency Radio, your number one network, tfrlive.com. Now, regular followers of Kev here will be wondering, why wasn't there a pre-show stream today? Well, let me tell you, in the name of digging up some of the finest information for you people out there to ponder over, I have had the most interesting of journeys down a really fascinating rabbit hole today. You know, because I do so many shows, so many streams, I try to give each and every guest an equal allotted time so that I can look at their information on the day of their shows. Now, it seems to work okay, but as soon as I took a look at today's guest's work, it changed everything because, like I say, this guy, he covers so much and he can bring so much information to the table that will add to all of the topics that we've spoke about on here at one time or another. And I am truly looking forward to this one. I hope you enjoy it. It should be good because our good friend Charlie Robinson, he came to me like a child on Christmas morning. He really did. He emailed me and he said, Kev, you have to hear the guest I've just had on. Well, he had me already because I know Charlie's a good guy. He wouldn't just recommend anyone. And that guest, that person that we're going to be talking to today, his name is Ken Ammi, and that's A-M-M-I. Now, he's a long-time researcher and lecturer on issues pertaining to worldview philosophies and various sorts of religion. He's posted, and I can attest to this, thousands of articles on his website. Has been published in apologetics journal. Spit it out, Kev. Get it out there. And has been interviewed for radio and podcasts. And today he's here with us. And to give you a taste of some of the books that Ken has put together, we've got Cain as Serpent Seed of Satan. We've got the Nephilim and Giants as per Pop Researchers, Volume 1 and 2. We've got multiple volumes of something, and I love the name of this, the Necronomicon Job. I got it out. You see, I couldn't say apologetics or apologists or whatever, but I got that one. Next up, we've got the Trinity texts. Does the Bible contain Trinitarian theology? And if so, where? What does the Bible say about angels? 50 Shades of Grey Aliens, Transhuman Hollywood, Aleister Crowley's influence on pop culture. I tell you, if that doesn't make for the perfect bio, for the perfect guest for the Kev Baker Show, I can't be doing my job right. So without any further ado, let's get him on here. Ken, welcome to the show, brother. It is an absolute honor to have you here. I had no idea about you or your work until Charlie introduced me to it. And all I can say is, wow. So thanks for being here, first off. And I gave you a bit of a bio there. I butchered a couple of the words. That's how I roll. You'll get used to me. But Ken, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be this prolific writer and author and researcher into some of the deepest topics out there.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor for me as well. And as you know, what was interesting is I heard Charlie was on your show. I was reaching out to him saying, put me in touch with Kev. Meanwhile, you were reaching out with him saying, put me in touch with Ken.
Yes, it's one of these shows that I think was always meant to happen, Ken.
Yes.
And like I was saying to you before the show, I've covered a lot of the topics that you speak about here, in particular the Nephilim. It comes up umpteen times over the years.
Yes.
So later on in the show, I'm definitely looking forward to getting into some of that. The transhumanist stuff, I mean, we have to touch on that as well. But I think where I would like to start, if that's okay with you, coming from Fort Augustus on the banks of Loch Ness, I see that you have written about the man himself. Yes, Aleister Crowley. I talk about him all the time on here. I've been to Boleskine House, or as some people do call it, Boleskine
I know
House.
what's coming.
I know, yeah, a lot of American people have called it that. That's okay. We can roll like that. Ballskin house it is for today. And fortunately, it's burnt to the ground twice now. However,
Hmm.
it is getting rebuilt. There's a whole heap of secrecy around the people who are a part of the foundation that are restoring this property to its once glory. And not only that, Ken, but I'm not sure if you're aware, but they say that they're going to turn it into a spiritual retreat where they're going to invite people from all over the world to celebrate Aleister Crowley and also the Thelemic tradition and his religion that he put together. So Aleister Crowley, Ken, let's start there. Let's dive down that rabbit hole first. Talk to me about what you found out about this guy during your research. And why is it he is so popular still to this day?
Well, whenever I speak on Crowley, I have to always begin by pointing out that I consider William Ramsey to be the premier modern day Crowley researcher in terms of debunking or exposing Crowley. And so I give William all the credit. So we didn't mean for it to turn out this way, but William wrote a book called Children of the Beast, and he's written another one also, Prophet of Evil, where he referred to Crowley's influence on culture, particularly pop culture, or as I put it in the title of my book, pop-o culture. And then when I wrote my book, it just so turned out to be that William was dealing with earlier generations and movie makers and rock stars, and where I was dealing with more to do with the modern day. So it kind of worked out that they're almost part 1 and 2 books where we didn't really mean it to be that way. It just turned out that way. So for background on Crowley, go to William Ramsey. He's a guy who, when you travel to another country to hold Crowley's handwritten manuscripts in your hand so you can research them, I give William a lot of credit. Now, William
is a great researcher. I just want to second that. I actually only came across him recently, the past few months, but his investigative reporting and digging into cases, second to none, really. Really deep research.
Yes. See, he's an attorney by trade, so you can totally discern that by the way he goes about. So.
Yeah, big time. So what is it with Crowley then? Tell us about Crowley. Is he all that he's dressed up to be? What is he? Who was he, and why is he so popular?
Well, I think the appeal he has is, now you can be appealing in a good way or a bad way, right? So he has multifaceted appeal. You can point to him as he once referred to himself as the wickedest man in the world. You can despise him. You can condemn him. You can love him. You can praise him. You can be fascinated by him. I mean, there's so much about him that draws people's attentions, and that was part of his shtick, is being outlandish, making outlandish claims, doing horrendous things because of the concept of that no publicity is bad publicity, right? Or as Oscar Wilde put it in The Picture of Dorian Gray, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.
A very good point.
And so from any angle you look at Crowley, there's something that somebody will point to. So for instance, you look at his earlier days where he was raised in a very strict sect of, a branch of perhaps of a branch of a branch of a branch of a branch of Christianity, the Plymouth Brethren. And so that he found to be so strict, he rebelled against it. So that appeals to a lot of youngsters, right? Rebellion is just very appealing. And then if you even look at some of his extracurricular activities, poetry, mountaineering, chess playing, that's of interest to people because they kind of get the idea that Crowley was a very well-rounded person. And then he came from money, of course. He was well off because his family owned a brewery. And you kind of find that about people like Crowley or Madame Helena Blavatsky or Manly P. Hall, people who develop an interest in the occult, and they have enough money to be able to travel where they please and buy the texts that they please and not have to waste their time, working for a living. It makes it easy for them to collect knowledge and then come across seeming as if they really know what they're talking about, because they're okay, you have to remember the internet has changed things. There used to be a day where if you wanted certain books, you could not just walk down to your good old-fashioned bookstore. You had to find some obscure little dirty corner bookstore that had weird books. And maybe there was one like that in your city, maybe not.
Yeah.
So things used to be, I tell my kids all the time, in my day, look it up didn't mean type something in a search engine and then don't go beyond the first page of results. It's all right there, right? So that's part of it, is the air of erudition, and the fact that he seemed to be able to pull a lot of different things together. So, for example, he's involved with the Golden Dawn. He's involved with the Ordo Templi Orientis. He's doing yoga. He's just talking about so many different subjects. And plus, he's very much sort of the father of what you see happening in the 60s, at least in North America and in Europe, first world countries, which is basically the destruction of the traditional family, free love, free sex, drugs. It's all, that was stuff Crowley was ahead of his time preaching, but that was one of his main messages, is do what thou wilt is right there. And if you want to do all that stuff, you not only should do it, you are virtually commanded to do it by whatever entities revealed these ideas to him.
You look at the world now, Ken, and I'll get your take on this, obviously, but if Aleister Crowley was to take a look at the world today, he would probably think, hey, I've done a good job. I put people on the right path, because I often look at the times we live in as basically being Crowley times. The family's been torn apart more and more over the years. Sex now, what's the value on it? It's everywhere. Everyone's doing it to everyone else. It seems to me that, like I say, if Crowley could see today, he would be actually quite impressed with the way things have turned out.
Yes. Yep, go on your cell.
Yep, go on your cell, that's it, yep. So listen, when they claim that he was this big, super dark, evil guy, or he claimed he was, how truthful is that? I mean, what kind of elements of black magic, the satanic stuff, what's true? Separate the fact from the fiction for us if you can, a little, Ken.
There's always that I always keep in mind about Crowley, and that was something that harkens back to a character known as Shabtai Tzvi. You might have heard of the Shabbatians or Sabbateans, yep. Right? That comes from Shabtai Tzvi. And he was quite a character. Like, he underwent a wedding ceremony where he married a Torah scroll, okay? This guy was just the outlandish guy of his day. But something very interesting about his ideas was that he pointed out that the Talmud Bavli, okay, the Babylonian Talmud, it says that the Messiah would only come either in a generation that is altogether wicked or a generation that is altogether righteous, okay? Well, he figures, okay, I don't really foresee a generation that's going to be altogether righteous. But could I foresee a generation that'll be altogether wicked? That's more likely, considering human nature and everything. And so he proceeded to encourage people to commit as many sins as humanly possible.
Yeah, I can see the thinking there. It is a lot easier to corrupt the system than to clean it up and make it all holier than thou.
Right.
Yeah.
But you see how twisted it is to think to yourself, I'm going to sin as much as possible. I'm going to encourage other people to sin as much as possible in the name of holiness, in the name of bringing the Savior. You see?
Yeah.
That's how messed up it is. That's how twisted and perverted it is. Okay, and so then you go through him, through on to the Frankist movement. You eventually end up with Crowley. And what's Crowley saying? Well, he considers vice to be virtue. And so that's why he sets about to commit the most repulsive acts you could ever not even hope to imagine, is for the same reason. He thinks that these deplorable acts are holy acts. That's how twisted the thinking is. That's how perverse and how backwards. And so that to me is one of the main things to keep in mind about Crowley, is how deluded really he was to think that what he was doing was all in the name of this twisted sense of virtue being vice, vice being virtue, right? Like the Bible says, putting good for evil, evil for good, bitter for sweet, sweet for bitter. Where you're supposed to be able to distinguish those things, but that's how things get corrupted.
You know,
so
I've never heard anyone really describe it like that. Going to these evil ends in the most twisted way possible to bring about the coming of the Messiah. Fascinating, truly fascinating. And when he was up in my neck of the woods, I'm glad you pointed out that he was a wealthy man. I mean, I don't know if you maybe uncovered anything on your research about why exactly he chose Loch Ness. I've seen one of his writings where he hinted at the fact there was already a monster there, so maybe it would be a good place to go and do the work in. But that Abramelin work in itself, I mean, what was it he was trying to do up in the Highlands of Scotland?
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I've not been able to really solidify whether he went there because of the rumored monster or...
It's very vague, Ken, isn't it? It's hard to pin down why he chose there.
Right, and because other people will claim that the monster came about because of Crowley's workings there.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a case to be made for that, but at the same time, we also had new roads being built as well on the other side of the loch, which could account for more people traveling up and down it. You can see it more. Me personally, having lived there for the first 18 years of my life, the whole area is supernaturally active. There's definitely a kind of a very low vibration there, and that's borne out when you look at suicide numbers. Fort Augustus, a small village, 800 people, and yet the amount of youngsters, especially young lads, who have taken their own life over the years, and I know this is a global problem as well. However, I think there's something deeper rooted up there. It's just, it feels off, Ken, you know?
So yeah, his main premise was to get in touch with whatever he might have thought they were at any given moment, and to receive these revelations so he could become the sort of styled neo-prophet of Crowleyanity, right, of Philema. He wanted to be the focal point. He wanted to be Satan's right-hand man, or I guess we could say left-hand man, right?
Yeah, probably more apt, right? And the actual working itself, I mean, he got called away. From what I believe, he got called back to France, or he was going to go and get one of the manuscripts he had been promised. What do you know about that? The fact that he left it open and just left the area?
Well, that's okay. So that's one of the speculations, is that he was not done with this working, this magical project. And yeah, he left it, and that's the speculation, is that's where a lot of this spooky stuff came from. Because if you think about what he was doing as opening a gateway, the claim is that he never closed it, and he busied himself about other things, so that this left it open, and the place just became, like you said, a haunted place, a place of dark supernaturalism. So whatever, again, my problem is always, I don't know how much of this we can solidify, but at least that's a speculation.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes down to it, I don't even believe what these magicians, now magician with a K, as people always like to say who research this stuff. I'm not really sold on the idea of this summoning and banishing stuff.
Well, I was going to ask you, where did he, I mean, was this his own kind of musings? Was this an ancient text? Where did he get these workings from, you know?
Well, one thing about these magicians is that they keep what they call grimoires. So they're kind of like diaries, and they're very systematic in that sense. It's very interesting. They'll say, here's what I did, here's how I did it, here's the being that showed up and what happened and what they told me, so that you have centuries now of these magicians who can look back on that and kind of reproduce the same results or try to, or change them slightly. But what I was getting at is, from my own worldview philosophy, which is I'm a Messianic Jew, so I'm a Christian, and also on what I've heard some of them say, all this stuff about summoning and banishing isn't really what it seems. It is implied that these magicians would have the power to summon, again, whatever you want to call them, spirits, demons, ascended masters, spirit guides, you know, whatever they might be called. And then they do your bidding and they grant you whatever they grant you, and then you banish them and they have to go away because you're the one in power. I would take that to be just a sham, right? It's just a game that they're playing with you, because you're not ultimately in control over them. And I have heard more than one magician talk about how what happens after a while is the being will end up saying something to them to the likes of that, you can't treat me like a prostitute, just calling on me, and then when you're done with me, sending me away. And then the tables are turned. And then they realize, oh, I didn't banish anything. This thing can just show up whenever it wants, and it ultimately has power over me, right? It's like the ultimate Faustian bargain. Sure, along the way, it appears like you're in charge and you're getting what you want, but such is not the case in the end. You got to pay the piper.
Yeah, you know, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you always hear about people saying, don't mess around with Ouija boards, don't go touching things you don't understand, you're opening doorways. And for these magicians, and Aleister Crowley, he was far from unintelligent. You know, almost narcissistic to believe that you would have control over anything like that, Ken. Wouldn't you agree?
I do.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, even the Ouija board has a goodbye written on the board at the end, which again gives you the sense that since you're the one in charge, you can just send this thing off, the spirit you summoned and you're speaking to and you're getting information from, and then you tell, yeah, goodbye, get out of here. Right.
Yeah, and of course, you know, you've got Crowley. He created Thelema. Jack Parsons. Is he a character that basically tried to live the life of Aleister Crowley, almost become like the next Aleister Crowley? Because I've heard stories about how he basically, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but he tried to do one of Crowley's workings in the Nevada desert. So where does he fit into all of this as we kind of slowly come towards present day and then get into how it affects Hollywood and everything that we're watching right now? Let's go for Parsons.
Sure. You know, what's interesting, in 2018, TV show, well, okay, that dates me, right? A Wi-Fi streaming service show.
Yeah. Whatever you call it now.
Yeah. Whatever these crazy kids are calling them nowadays. A show in 2008 started called Strange Angel, and it's based on Jack Parsons and how he got interested in the occult. So he's, again, just like Crowley, he's as relevant today as he was, maybe more than he was a couple of years ago even. When they're making new shows about him, But yeah, so the story goes that Jack Parsons, who was a real-life rocket scientist, and Elron Hubbard, let's not forget about him,
Yep.
right? The founder of Dianetics and later on the quote-unquote Church of Scientology.
Hold that thought, Ken. Hold that
Yes.
thought. Oh, this is going to
Okay,
be
here's the
a
music.
fast show. We will be right back. Don't go anywhere, folks. 3 minutes. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Second part of today's Kev Baker Show with Ken Ammi. Please visit his website. It's truefreethinker.com. That's truefreethinker.com. I warn you though, you'll get lost on there. There's a whole heap of good stuff on that website, Ken. I'm glad to have you here today. We got interrupted by the break there, just when you were telling us about a TV show, and it's one of the few I haven't seen, actually. I love my TV shows, especially if it's weird and interdimensional and crazy stuff going on. But Strange Angel, for some reason, I haven't seen that. And you were telling us it's all centered around Jack Parsons. And I think we got cut off just when you were bringing up his other good friend, Elron Hubbard. What a pair they make, right?
Yes. So unfortunately, the show Strange Angel, there's parts that are difficult to watch, and there is some nudity in it. So unfortunately, it's one of those shows where, yeah, it can be problematic for some people. So I don't want to officially endorse it. But so Hubbard and Parsons are said to have attempted to birth the new child, the new Messiah child, through a cohort, a woman that they referred to as the Scarlet Woman. And again, this is one of those cases where, well, I can only tell you what we've heard, whether it's true or not. I'm not sure anybody really knows, but it is alleged that they performed a magical rite called the Babylon working, and that the results were opening of a portal. And so all of a sudden, that was in 1947, all of a sudden we start to have a lot of reports of strange things flying around in the sky and appearing to people. So again, it's one of those things. Now, I always like to point out about Hubbard and his worldview that if you can remember the cover of the book Dianetics, right? Do you happen to recall that, or the commercials even?
I can pull that up. I know what Dianetics is, but I can't. I'd be lying if I said I know the cover of the book. I'll bring this up here. The volcano,
yes,
is that it there? Yep.
Right. Now, the thing to note is that that is not an erupting volcano. That is an exploding volcano. The difference being the volcano isn't erupting due to geological forces going on in the earth. The volcano is exploding because of the Scientologist space opera, as it were, which talks about how an intergalactic warlord named Xenu dealt with overpopulation by bringing a bunch of aliens to the earth, dropping them into volcanoes and bombing them. That's what you're seeing on the book cover. Is basically almost like the equivalent of what a gas chamber is to the Jews, right? This is what you're looking at, is a place of destruction where these aliens were bombed to death and exploded to death. And so on their worldview, on Scientology, that's where a lot of our emotional and spiritual issues come from, is that these beings were blown up to bits, and so their spirits, what they call thetans, roamed the earth, and then eventually human beings came around, and these thetans attached themselves to us. And so that's the role of Scientology, is a sort of styled high-tech form of exorcism, essentially, where that's the purpose of Scientology, is to get rid of these body thetans. And now, the point of going into that backstory is Elron Hubbard's concepts of now magic is all about the imposition of the will to cause change in the real world, right? So his idea was the reason for putting that on the book cover is that if you look at that volcano, it would trigger in you a past life memory of that event, and so these thetans would be like freaked out by it. So it's the concept of subliminal reactions or post-hypnotic suggestions, or there's many ways to look at it. And that was the reason he did that, because he wanted you to kind of be shocked into realizing what was wrong or suspecting what was wrong with you. So then you would have to turn to Dianetics, which then turned into Scientology for help.
Scientology, there's a show waiting to happen. We could probably do a series on the weirdness of Scientology. But it's interesting how you, I had no idea that this was a subliminal that we were actually looking at here. And that takes us nicely into, you know, the kind of stuff that gets used in film, TV, Hollywood all the time, really. Because we're being programmed on a mass scale. I truly do believe that. I don't understand all of it. It's very interesting. But I think you are going to take us a little step further in that understanding of what's going on with a lot of this stuff, Ken. Again, I have to take time out to thank you for sharing your years of research into these topics. I don't think people maybe appreciate the vastness of your work. And I don't say that lightly, dude. I've done over 1,300 shows now, and the volume of work that you've produced, it's unbelievable. It's brilliant, man. It truly is, you know.
Thank you. Well, you know, I probably praise Jesus for all of it, of course.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. And we're talking Jack Parsons, Hubbard here. And like you say, it's hard to really nail down fact from fiction. We all know what they're rumored to have done. We can certainly see that from 1947, and I'm thinking Roswell here forward, we have had, you know, an ongoing thing with things being sighted in the sky, people claiming to have been abducted. You know, the whole kind of swathe of topics that covers there. Do you personally, I mean, how much do you think the opening or the potential opening of a portal has played into all of this?
Well, I did want to point out one single thing. I even have a Scientology book cover, and the only image on the cover is a falling bomb.
That's about right.
I mean, who does that in a self-help book, you know? A falling bomb. But that's why. That's why, because you're supposed to be picturing, okay, here it comes, and now I'm in this trauma. So,
yeah.
Anyhow, I'm glad you referred to it as a swipe.
Yeah.
Because the minute we start talking about aliens and UFOs, okay, I always like to set the table of a discussion before jumping into the middle of it. So just saying aliens and UFOs causes a tremendous mess because they're potentially unrelated issues, right? Because there's people who claim, hey, I had experience with aliens, and there's people who say, hey, I had experiences with UFOs. But this one necessarily didn't see a UFO, and this one didn't necessarily see aliens, right? But then there's those who do, so that's right in the middle. And then you have well, I saw a UFO, and then aliens come out, and I had an experience with them. So those are three main categories. But then there's subcategories, right? Oh, I saw a UFO. Well, what was it? Could have been 100 different things, right? Could have been secret government tech. Could have been weather. Could have been a spiritual manifestation, some kind of demonic illusion, or who knows what. Okay, I had an experience with aliens. Well, there's people who conveniently claim to have been receiving messages from alien, and they never saw a UFO and they never saw an alien. It's all done telepathically, right? Which to me is fascinating. Why is it exactly that these alien contactees who just received telepathic messages from aliens have the same exact shtick as psychics who claim to be in contact with the dead. How come it's the same exact thing? Right? And it is...
Yeah.
It is convenient, by the way, to be able to claim you're in touch with aliens and you've never seen one. You don't have anything to show for it. You could just make claims. That's very convenient, of course. And one of my other...
Unfortunately, Ken, it's become all too popular nowadays as well. Yeah. Well,
call yourself a psychic. I mean, what's the real difference?
Exactly.
And in fact, as of the last few years, Whitley Strieber, who has been the poster boy for that sort of thing for decades, is suspecting that this whole experience of having visitors, as he calls them, or greys, he also calls them, he does suspect it's all about communicating with the dead, incidentally. And I think he might be onto something.
Wow.
Not that I believe the actual dead are contacting anybody, but demonic beings who know enough about... Okay, let me take a step back. So let's say there's been a demon or a horde of them hanging around a certain geographical region. I don't know how they divvy it up. Is it by state, city, neighborhood, family? Do they even follow any kind of conventions we would recognize? I don't know. But let's say that they're familiar enough with your family going back generations. And then all of a sudden, one of them says, hey, I'm your dear Auntie Joe, whatever the name may be. And I know this about what happened, and I can tell you where to find the lost keys to the car, or whatever it may be.
The kind of thing that would solidify your belief that this is who you're talking to, right?
Right. So to me, that's one of the main ways to explain that is if you have these entities hanging around you, these demons who would know that stuff, and then a person styles themselves some kind of psychic, and they have this little creature whispering in their ear. That's one thing I actually really found fascinating about Caputo. What's the psychic's name? Caputo. Teresa Caputo?
Not sure of that one, Ken. Not heard of her, sorry.
Yeah, let me see. Anyhow, one of the most popular psychics, particularly on TV, Teresa Caputo, that's her name. Now, she claims that she's in contact with anybody and everybody who's dead, right? Because hundreds of people go and attend her shows. I don't know what else to call them, her performances. And I'm talking to your dead relative, now I'm talking to your dead relative, now I'm talking to your dead relative. But if you actually pay attention to what she's saying, she's always referring to spirit, singular, and how she gets these information from spirit, not spirits, plural. So to me, it tells me she's got some demon hanging around her, feeding her information, and then she puts on a show. That's why I called it that. I mean, it's a performance.
Yeah, definitely a performance.
We
had a guy in the UK called Derek Akora, and he had a spirit, Sam, and that was his intermediary. It would go between. So I've definitely come across this template before where they're in contact with one being.
Right. And I grant you, a lot of them are straight up charlatans. Yeah. For example, I asked my friend's a police officer, and I said, I bet you could tell a lot about a person just looking at them based on your training and experience. He said, oh, yeah. So a lot of it is what they call cold reading. And while with the internet today, just get on their Facebook and you can find out the most intimate details of their private lives and then just regurgitate them. That's extremely easy nowadays. But so going back to the alien and UFO thing, so to me, there's a lot of groundwork to talk about before you even start thinking about what these things may be, because the phenomena is so varied. It's so varied that what are we talking about? Voices in your head? Are we talking about visions? Are we talking about supposed organic beings who actually appear in your bedroom? What is it exactly we're talking about, right? And it gets very complicated. So, for example, on the side of aliens, again, whatever that might mean, do they come from our solar system, from another part of the universe, from another dimension? I mean, you name it, they've claimed everything. But to me, it's fascinating to note that one of the things I've focused on a lot through the years is dealing with atheism. And they are 99% an anti-Christian support group and 1%, anti-miscellaneous. Well, then when you look at occultism, again, 99% anti-Christian, 1% anti-miscellaneous. Aliens and UFOs, you cannot get away from the occult aspect of those phenomena. And what are the alien messages telling us? Well, they're 99% anti-Christian, 1% anti-anything else. So it's kind of fascinating that these beings would traverse the vast distances of the universe or dimensions or whatever to come here and set us straight about our theology. Really? They got nothing better to do but come and tell us that Christianity isn't true. And so one of the themes I recognize from alleged messages from aliens is threefold. And now it's fascinating because it functions in terms of misinformation, which means when I make the 3 points, I know I agree with them. I'm sure you will too. But the problem is their solutions. So they'll say, well, you humans are always battling each other over politics, right? Nations fighting each other, war, all that. Yeah, that's a big problem. And you humans are always battling each other about religion, right? Theology. Yeah, that's definitely an issue. And you humans are destroying the earth, you're polluting it. Okay, yeah, I agree with all 3 points. And they're constantly telling us in one way or another. Those are like the bottom line big 3. So their solution, form a one world government with a one world religion and worship the earth as a being, right? Worship the earth, paganism, basically. It's like, well, Now, why does that sound exactly like the book of Revelation? And add a little touch of Romans chapter 1 while you're at it. You got the whole picture right there. Why would they be telling us exactly the goals of what a lot of people call the Antichrist? Why would that be?
This is why this is why Charlie knew me and you would have a good conversation. I'm telling you, man, you're making me think about things in a different way. You're shifting my perception, my perspective slightly. I love it. And I've heard those very same 3 messages, mantras almost, all the time. But I've never put the 3 of them together and then equate it to usually where we hear that kind of stuff coming from,
Yes.
So the whole alien thing then, there's a lot of argument, and I've had it in my chat room, I've seen it on multiple shows. The minute you bring up alien, that word, because of our upbringing, because of our belief systems, we've all got our own way of viewing what that is. If you're devoutly Christian, you'll automatically run towards the demonic side of things, out to the other extreme where they're just purely what they say they are. They're physical aliens that come from different parts of the universe or multiverse, whatever. Are you making a case for potentially, at least these communications that we're getting, more likely to be demonic in nature then?
So I always would want to start with just very basic common sense things we know, and then maybe get paranormal, and then maybe go off into outer space or another dimension. So starting basics, we know that a lot of people suffer from all kinds of delusions. We know some of these are hallucinations, some are dreams, some people are just demented. I mean, there's a lot of mental health issues, and a lot of people claiming that they're in touch with whatever entities that most likely don't even exist. Okay, that's like basic level stuff. So that would explain some of it. Then we know, for instance, okay, back to Whitley Strieber, a fascinating issue with him. For one, he claims his first experience with these visitors was in his meditation room in his home in upstate New York. So there you have an occult aspect to it. He's up there meditating every day, and guess what? These beings allegedly show up and start doing all things, kinds of unmentionable things to him. And incidentally, he undergoes Stockholm syndrome or battered wife syndrome, right? They put him through such tremendous trauma, and he ends up loving them for it because, well, he's grown spiritually from it. But Whitley Strieber inevitably will end up claiming whatever is convenient at any given time. So then he says, well, but then I remembered I've actually been having these experiences since childhood. Okay, so here's what I'm getting at. Then one day he does this whole lecture where, actually, I'm going to take one step back. So as I would listen to him, I would note, hey, you know, he said that he's got some military ties in his family. Okay, I'll just store that in the back of my head just in case. And then now he's saying that he's got ties to the CIA. Okay, that's interesting. Then one day he comes right out and says, you know, I underwent MK Ultra mind control experimentation. And so that was incredibly telling to me. Now, again, whether that happened or not, who knows? I don't know, but it's a more likely explanation in my mind than that these hyperdimensional visitor greys are visiting this guy and talking to him because they put him through trauma. Well, guess what? MK Ultra. One thing he talked about once is how the big gray alien black eyes really disturbed him, and so they're kind of trying to treat him a little nice about that. So one of the aliens, visitors, shows up wearing those, you know, those ridiculously large plastic sunglasses.
Yeah.
He says one of them showed up wearing that to just kind of tease him, like, okay, you know, we don't really want to freak you out too badly. So I'm thinking, well, okay, maybe a hyperdimensional visitor went to the local carnival and bought those glasses and whatever. I'm being hyperbolic, but
it's good.
Or is it that, or is it that some jerk at the CIA is like, man, I put this guy under hypnosis and I wear these ridiculous glasses, and the guy thinks that I'm some sort of alien gray, right? Well, that to me is, let's start there. Why not? Why don't we start there? That's something more tangible and accessible and mundane. And so he also says, well, while I did undergo MK Ultra, I also know the visitor experiences were real. And he says that is because on days when he would have experiences with them, people who would run into him later that day would note that he was agitated. Okay, well, that's a bit of a non sequitur, because if you were undergoing MK Ultra trauma-based mind control experiments, yeah, you would be agitated. Yeah, you would. So again, that doesn't sell me on the idea. See, so that's part of it, part of just the basic level, common sense level, things that we know and we can verify. Maybe not that it happened to a particular individual, but we know these things are real and true. So mental disorders and then mind control experimentation, those things are easy. So then, let's go off into the paranormal. I could very well see that demons might have an ability to manifest some kind of illusion. What I would imagine it's more mental than anything. But now, one thing I did in my book, 50 Shades of Grey Aliens.
I love that title, by the way. That is amazing. How did nobody else think of that, dude? You're a genius, you know? It's true. It's true. I've seen that today. I'm like, I'm going to love this guy. I like it, you know?
You know, what's interesting is Amazon contacted me and they demanded I change the title because it might be confusing to customers who are looking for, 50 Shades of Grey. And I'm like, if you don't understand context when you're trying to look for a book, then...
Exactly. These people have got bigger issues than the title of a book,
Yeah. So fortunately, there's so many people who work for Amazon that I essentially just told them it's satire, and then I ignored them and they just kind of went away and let me keep it. But one thing I've thought about, okay, now people have claimed that they've had experiences with aliens of every shape, every size, every color you could possibly imagine. And incidentally, I always find it convenient when your alien contactee looks exactly like a human being. That I love, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's like a bad, you might be a redneck if joke. Like, you might be a human if you look exactly like a human. Incidentally.
Yeah, it might kind of narrow it down a bit.
But the gray alien has certainly become like the stereotypical alien. So I wondered, where did that come from? That visage, that physiognomy, right? Where did that basic concept come from? And so I traced it back to H.G. Wells, who wrote a essay called Man of the Year 1 Million. And so he's applying an evolutionary worldview, and then he's extending it way off into the future and thinking, what will human beings look like? Well, guess what? Oh, I hear the music.
Hold that thought. We will be right back. Hour number 2 on today's Kev Baker Show. I have got the brilliant Ken Ammi with me here right now. His website is truefreethinker.com. That's truefreethinker.com. I urge you all to check that out, but not just yet, because we've still got an hour of radio to go. Ken, I have to thank you for being such a gracious guest. I tend to take my guests from here to there and everywhere in between, but I do it so randomly and sporadically that I just have to thank you for staying on your toes and keeping up with me here. And before the break, you were laying out something that I hadn't realised, and that is that one of the first descriptions of our typical grey alien, the big eyes, the big head, the small fella, we all know what the greys are like, but you were telling us that actually came from an H.G. Wells essay, is that correct?
Yes, in fact, while we're talking, I sent you an image that illustrates it in the text here, in the chat, I mean.
I'll get that. I'll send it over to the radio. If you're in the chat room over at TFR, stand by, I'll get that to you. So, I'll post that over there. Let's get into it, Ken. I want to make the most of the time I've got with you here today.
So, H.G. Wells, Man of the Year 1 Million, he applies his evolutionary worldview and wonders what humanity might look like a million years from now. And what does he describe? Well, due to high tech, we wouldn't need big, bulky bodies anymore. And we wouldn't really even need to have well-defined jaws because they would absorb nutrients through wading in a tub of fluids. And so the bodies are very, very small and spindly, except for big hands. They kind of walk around their hands. But the heads are enormous. And so along with a bigger head, then the eyes get extended. Don't need much of a mouth or a nose or ears anymore. And so what do you end up with? You end up with the essential gray alien physiognomy. And so he is not the only one who, well, let me put it this way. There are people who are involved in ufology who do claim that they believe gray aliens are humans from the future coming back in time to visit us. And, well, when you start looking at what H.G. Wells was talking about, it's based on imagination, right? It's based on evolution. It's based on what would we be like in the future. So that was really fascinating. And then In the book 50 Shades of Grey Aliens, I have, multiple pages of just pictures from book covers and magazine covers of golden era sci-fi books and comics, just tracing this basic idea of the basic idea of, yeah, that one's not mine.
Is that not your one? Somebody else has got it.
No.
50 Shades of Grey Aliens. Is this your one? I think this is your one here. Ken and me. There it is. There we go.
That's the one.
That's it.
That's the one.
Yeah, I'll put that link over in the TFR chat room just now so people can check that out. And check it out, folks. Ken's got so many books, honestly. Sorry to interrupt you there, brother. There we go.
Thank you. So what I was saying is this concept is, it's not a perfect timeline, but what I noticed is after H.G. Wells, you get the golden era of sci-fi, fantasy magazines, comic books, novels, and that is the theme, that these beings that have little small bodies and big heads are human beings, that they've either undergone a mutation that causes them to evolve very rapidly, or they're coming back in time from the future. And eventually, it's as if the concept is, well, how many times can you tell the same story, right? So eventually what ends up happening is, then the claim is these aren't actually human beings from the future or mutated or caused to evolve quickly. They're actually aliens. And so then you have the whole scheme, the whole plot turning around, where now these are claimed to be aliens from wherever they might come from. So I found that really fascinating. And then as we were talking during the break, then again, inevitably, it seems, with the occult aspect of the alien phenomena, you end up with Aleister Crowley again, because he draws that depiction of a being he calls Lamb, who he claims appeared to him, gave him certain revelation and what have you. And there you have the basic gray alien again. If you notice, incidentally, there's something a little maybe odd about Lamb, which is little tiny eyes. But yeah, if you look just above the eyes, you see that there's a grayed outline of what is potentially the outline of big bulging eyes. And
I've never seen that before.
Oriental Orientis.
I've looked at this umpteen times and I've never put the two of that together. I blatantly see it now, though. Yeah.
Yeah, and the OTO actually developed a ritualistic meditative practice where they would stare at this picture long enough, and then they claimed that those big giant eyes would open up. Okay, whatever. That's what they say.
Pareidolia is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah, if you stare at anything long enough, you know,
yes,
your mind does wonderful things, doesn't it?
Yes. So again, what does this all mean? The fact that I can trace this from imagination through fiction, and then on to Crowley claiming this is a being he had an experience with. What does it all mean? I don't know. If you were expecting the big reveal, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I'm just saying that this is definitely a verifiable, mundane, accessible part of what's going on here.
Big time, brother. Right. And I think maybe now we should maybe switch forward or push forward into some of your Hollywood stuff, the kind of decoding the movies that you've done there. If that's okay with you, because I could take you in many different directions here.
Yes.
But Hollywood, I am somebody that still likes to watch TV shows, the movies. Personally, since I ever found out about pre-programming and subliminals and the agendas that are intertwined into our fiction, as opposed to it turning me away from these shows, these programs, I actually find I enjoy them now on multiple levels because I can get the drama side of it, the story. But I also have a little smile on my face when I come across something and it's there, it's everywhere. Where they basically draw from the real world and they stitch it into their fictional narrative. But in reality, we're being programmed, we are being prepared, for something that's coming down the line. And I know that you've been focusing really hard on this transhumanist agenda that is always picking up speed. We're now in a world where we're starting to see what the neural link, the brain chip, is going to look like. So Hollywood and transhumanism. Ken, where do we start here? Because it's a big topic. I mean, what are some of the major movies? If you could think of 3 movies to recommend to people where it really gives them a picture of what the future's going to be like, what 3 would you pick out?
So let me take a step back, because you know I always have to start with some groundwork.
I like your groundwork. I like it. Yeah, big time.
So transhumanism is an incredibly complicated subject because there's so many aspects to it. But as far as the contexts from which Ken and I are coming to you, transhumanism inevitably will end up combining high-tech, evolution, and the occult. And incidentally, that's exactly the same with the alien messages and experiences. High-tech, evolution, and the occult. It's like you cannot get away from them. So that's what you will find in transhumanism. Generally, those 3 things working together. So one major book that I wrote about this issue is called Transhuman Hollywood, and I subtitled it From Normative Fiction to Predictive Programming. So let me just talk about that for a second. Normative fiction is a scholarly term, and it refers to the concept of when you want to normalize something in the culture, you put it into fiction so that it's easily digestible, right? It's accessible. It's like I always give the example of multiverse theory, right? Who is reading peer-reviewed journal papers on multiverse theory? Not many people. But how many people believe it because they've seen it in so many movies and shows? Tons. A lot of people are ready to, oh yeah, I could totally accept that. I've seen it depicted in the big screen, so of course it's easily digestible. See what I mean? So, yeah. And then predictive programming would be more of hinting or even being blunt about something that's going to happen, so that when it happens, you're sort of already somewhat psychologically prepared, and it seems familiar to you, and you're more apt to accept it. But okay, so number 1 movie. The Creation of the Humanoids. Actually, you could find this one on YouTube because it's so old. I think it's from 1962. Creation of the Humanoids, to me, is still unmatched in its sophistication and its philosophical content, in its transhumanist content, in its evolutionary content, occult content, you name it. And yes, you can see it from the images there. It's not the most aesthetically pleasing movie because it's so old, and some of the acting is actually so bad it's captivating, you know. But the last time I watched it, which was for a documentary I'm narrating for a project with William Ramsey, actually, to bring him up again, I noticed there's almost no dialogue in that movie that is sort of puff and fluff and just kind of not really important. Everything that they say in that movie is worth listening to. So that one would be absolutely number 1. Also because it seems like it's very behind the scenes influential. So for example, Philip K. Dick was very well known for his book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?, which was then made into the movie Blade Runner. The main theme of which was, can you make an android that's so perfect that it doesn't even know it's an android, right? It thinks it's a human. Well, Creation of the Humanoids came out before Dick even wrote his novel, and that's the theme in Creation of the Humanoids.
So this has been an inspiration to a lot of sci-fi people over the years then, right?
Yes, in fact, the movie Automata that is relatively recent. To me, that's like a watered-down version of the creation of the humanoids. So in the creation of the humanoids, human beings, again, they build robots, but they also build these humanoids, which are the androids. Okay, an android is an anthropomorphic robot. And so what the androids start doing is they start developing their own theology. And what they're doing is they're getting the corpses of recently deceased humans, and they're high-tech resurrecting them as androids who, again, don't know that they're androids. So that movie is well worth watching. It's as if it's more relevant today than it was back in the 60s. Truly, truly amazing. And I mean, I know I should be mentioning the standards, right? The Matrix, okay, all these movies, Blade Runner, okay, everyone knows those. There's no reason to only select the big hits that everyone knows about. So another, excuse me. I'm trying to think of another one off the top of my head because I'm trying to be.
Yeah, I've put you on the spot, man. A lot of people talk about Metropolis as well. That's another quite famous one, right?
Absolutely, and I'm kind of just stuck because I am trying to think of more the less popular movies because they're so incredibly important and potentially influential from behind the scenes. Metropolis is another one that I recently rewatched. Again, for the project with Ramsey. And I mean, to me, it blows my mind that the movie is from 1927. It's so old, it's a silent film. They didn't have the technology to match the sound with the film. And yet, what is being depicted? The creation of a robot, which is then turned into an android by the downloading of the contents of a woman's brain and uploading them into the robot. A robot, incidentally, which you see sitting right in front of a gigantic upside-down pentagram. I mean...
You know, talk about ahead of its time, you know?
Yes.
Wow.
And what was happening is Fritz Lang, the director, and his wife were working on a project where she was writing a novel and he was writing, and she and him were writing the script for the movie around the same time. So she actually ended up publishing a novel called Metropolis. And her novel definitely contains a lot more occult themes than made it into the movie. But you have a ton of really interesting things in that movie, everything from order from chaos, that the master of Metropolis, as they call him, he had built the new Tower of Babel. I mean, there's so much to it that's, again, almost more relevant today than it ever has been.
And over here, on the 6th of October, on our major network, Sky TV, they're going to be releasing a very modern adaptation of Huxley's Brave New World.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that might be one that you'll definitely be wanting to check out, I would think.
Yes.
Because, what's your thoughts then? I mean, are we really looking at a future where we're going to be merging with machine? Are we looking at a new race, a new species altogether? Is that the end goal here, Ken, in your opinion?
If I had to project, I would say, well, I'm going to go back to H.G. Wells again, and the time machine, where you have basically humanity has split in two, right? You have the Eloi and the Morlock, and the Eloi are just basically organic, right? They're granola. They're like childlike. They just spend their days on entertainment, and they're not very smart, and it doesn't really matter because the Morlock are the ones underground who build the technology, who provide and produce for the Eloi, but they also consume them. And so if that would be, if I had to project, my conclusion would be that humanity will end up splitting in two, because unless you somehow manage to subjugate every human on the planet and do these things to them, like turning them into cyborgs, right? Implanting technology into them, there'll inevitably be a branch of humanity who will not undergo that for whatever reason. And so that I could see. And we're already having, as you know, a lot of increased technology where you see that, okay, the thing is, there's some transhumanists like who have done a lot of good, beneficial things for people with various handicaps, mental handicaps, physical handicaps, like Ray Kurzweil. Has done a lot of very good work working with prosthetics, working with the visually impaired. And so a lot of transhumanists will keep their eye on what's going on in those sorts of fields, like prosthetics or dealing with what do you do for a blind person, a deaf person, right? And then they'll take that technology and they'll co-opt it towards a different end, right?
I'm a big, huge Elon Musk fan. And I can see that template being played out with the Neuralink, because his big selling point, and who can argue with anything that's going to improve the life of anyone, be it somebody that's paralyzed, whatever. But because I'm his fanboy, it doesn't mean I'm naive to the fact that there's something far bigger going on here, you know, far bigger going on. Wouldn't you agree?
Right, because what he ultimately is saying is that what's known as strong artificial intelligence, right? I mean, we already have artificial intelligence, but strong artificial intelligence is what it's called when it's self-aware, right? The only way to really survive it, he says, is to become cyborgs. So it's kind of like a catch-22, where you have to become a cyborg to deal with strong AI. And so that kind of forces you to be stuck, right? You're either going to get on board and survive, or you won't, right?
And then there comes that separation again of the two groups of people, right?
Right.
Big
Now,
time.
I remember when I went to the gym one time, there's a certain table where that's known as the table where people put stuff. You can take like magazines or whatever. And there was a stack of brand new comic books, maybe 7 of them, and every single one had transhumanist themes in them. Every one. So this generation is growing up from the moment that unfortunately they're just barely learning how to walk, and their parents already put a device into their hand that they're going to stare at for the rest of their life, right? That's just from day one anymore. Day one.
Yep.
It's a whole different world.
And of course, when you've got Musk going on at Joe Rogan that you mentioned earlier, we got a totally different idea of what the Neuralink would be all about. We'd be able to play music in our heads. We'd be able to talk without the, slowing down because speech is so slow. It's craziness. It really is craziness. And for as much as I do love Elon Musk and some of the stuff he's done, that does truly worry me. And I don't see everyone adopting this, so Ken. I truly don't. Whether it'll be a minority or not, I'm still not sure. But I don't think, even despite the fact, like you say, that children nowadays, maybe once our generation's gone, maybe when we're living in a world where all the generations have had this ubiquitous technology, the internet, from the time they were born, maybe it's going to be an easier agenda to push through then, I would imagine.
Right, which I can think back to the novel Childhood's End.
Yeah.
Okay, where the aliens were privy enough to our psychology to know, let's not show ourselves to them until this entire generation has died off, because the new generation will, from day one, grow up knowing that there's this alien presence on Earth. And so then when we finally reveal ourselves to them, it'll be much less of a shock. They'll just be, it's just another day, right?
Yeah. So when you see...
And so,
on you go.
I was just going to say that this is part of what makes transhumanism such an incredibly difficult and complicated issue, because if I say, well, no one should get any technology implanted into them, then someone's going to tap me in the shoulder and say, look at my child, look at my child. They're disabled, they have mental issues, they're blind, right? They're quadriplegic, and so who am I to say for them what they can have implanted into them to better their lives, just because I have a philosophy or what have you that says, well, I'm going to be really staunch about this. It's a very, very complicated issue. And then, so how far do you go? How far does it go? Do the people who will, let's just imagine they get implants in their brains that have them, give them the ability to access basically everything online instantly, right? So they're a billion times more intelligent than you, and all of a sudden they're looking down on you like, okay, you know, you like banging on a rock with a stick, and that's about the level of development you have. We're just so far beyond you. I mean, I've heard real life transhumanists speaking in terms such as these, like Hugo de Garis, when he's talking about how they would just like flick you off like an insect. Like you would become so utterly meaningless. You wouldn't even be recognized as a member of their own species, because these people would be functioning at just such a different level than you.
So, Ken, something that comes up on my show a lot is when we talk about the strong AI, as you call it, I tend to call it the artificial general intelligence, the one that's the all-seeing, all-dancing, kind of omnipresent force. It's been said, and I can definitely see why people say this, that all technology has been derived from communications with spirit, be it demonic in many cases is the case. And I want to ask you, do you look at something like an artificial general intelligence as being something that will take on a life of its own? Because I've heard people saying that this is almost the Antichrist. This is purely evil. I don't know where I lie on that, to be honest with you, because I have seen where some of the technologists do dabble with the occult and they do get some information. But again, we're talking about algorithms. Can a combination of algorithms really lead to the birthing of an Antichrist in the form of an AI? What do you think?
Well, I will point out that I'm sure you're aware Elon Musk said with artificial intelligence we are summoning a demon.
What a great place to leave it. What a great place. We'll be back on the other side, folks. Don't go anywhere. Remember, check out... Well, can you believe it? Final segment of today's Kev Baker Show. This has been a quick one, and that is always the sign of a good show. What a great guest. Ken, Ammi, let people know where they can follow you on anti-social media. I know you've got a Twitter account. I don't know about Facebook. I'm not sure about that one. But your website as well, sir. Let people know where they can find this amazing work that you've done.
Well, I make it easy, you know. I know all these guys, they give you their Twitter and their Facebook and their YouTube, and they spend half an hour just telling you where to find them. So for me, it's simple. Just go to truefreethinker.com, all one word, True Free Thinker, and there's everything you could ever want right there.
Oh, trust me, he ain't lying there, folks. So before the break, you left us on one of my favourite Elon Musk quotes. Yes, he was talking about, you know, the fact that we could be releasing demons here. Now, I've also spoke with, and I'm lucky enough to be one of the very few people who's interviewed Geordie Rose, the guy behind the D-Wave, and he's infamous for saying that it would be like a tsunami of demons coming our way when we fire up the AI and get it working. He talks about the D-Wave being the altar to an alien god, no less. I had to get him on the show. I had to pick his brain about it. Still don't know quite how I feel about him. A lot better than I did initially. Some people say he is the Antichrist. Some people say it's Elon Musk. But what do you say about artificial general intelligence? Is it demonic? What do you think?
Now, so we refer to strong artificial intelligence. So what do you mean by general?
General, strong, same thing. But
Okay.
like, because you'd kind of call it strong or weak. I call it narrow or sometimes wide or artificial general intelligence. You know, the all-see and all that. Not the one that'll like autofill a sentence on our phone. I'm not worried about that one taking over the world. But the but the ones that will have the general intelligence, like you described it, once it becomes self-aware, and dare I say it, sentient of a sort. So what do you make of that? Is it as evil as some people make out?
Actually, the artificial intelligence we already have on our phones, I would be worried about that one taking over because it's so ridiculous and annoying.
I think we might be able to beat that one, though. Because it's so annoying, we might be able to actually trick that one. But, you know, the one that Elon Musk, and I've often speculated, because I can't know, but when he made that talk about the AI and us having to merge with it, because if not, we were going to get left behind. Now, maybe he's a good actor, but it looked to me as if potentially he had had a little glimpse at one of these AIs. Maybe he had seen what it is, what it's going to be like. Again, that's entirely speculation. I want to get your take on it. Is it as evil as people make out?
Well, so the first issue is, could it really happen? Of course, we have tons of people saying it could. But, I mean, does general or strong artificial intelligence hit a brick wall when it encounters an incompleteness theorem? So in other words, could it actually really happen would be the first question. And actually what I've pondered a lot is, how would that even be determined, right? What if we have an artificial intelligence that's not quite 100% strong or general, but it's 90 or 80? Would we even be able to tell? So what if it's more like Wizard of Oz and there's a puppeteer behind it all, right? Because it's not quite strong yet. It's not quite 100% general. But it's almost there, maybe. But then there's some human pulling the levers behind the scenes. I mean, I'm not sure how we would even determine that. Right? What would we do? Would we ask it, hey, are you self-conscious? Yeah, I am. Oh, okay. What is it, like a hyper Turing test? What is it going to be? Do you know everything there is to know? Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
whatever.
I mean, the Turing test now, I mean, it's antiquated, right? Because there are chatbots out there that if you were having some kind of interaction with, bearing in mind the intelligence of some real physical people in the real world that we deal with online, these chatbots actually appear to be, and could be indistinguishable from whether you're talking to chatbot or human.
There was also the case of Facebook, who developed artificial intelligence, and they had two devices that they had programmed, and these devices started talking to each other, and all of a sudden they started talking to each other in a language the programmers no longer understood.
Yeah, and they couldn't pull the plug quick enough, right?
Right, but they shut them down because they realized, well, okay, these artificial intelligences, they're already communicating in a way we don't understand, so that's it for us. We don't no longer know what's going on.
And that's one of the problems in AI, Ken, isn't it? The black box problem, they call it. You know, you can do the algorithms, you can put together the data sets. More and more, they're not even putting together data sets now. But once it goes into that algorithm, AI, whatever you want to call it, the results it produces on the other end, it's a bit of an enigma to even those that program it, right? Because it's that black box, it does its own thing.
So that's one of the concerns, and of course, well, we've all seen played this out in sci-fi movies forever, right? An artificial intelligence which is so wholly other, it's so beyond humanity that it just sees us as a problem to solve as just something that it can't even relate to. And so what happens when you're dealing with an entity that is viewing you as just unworthy of consideration? You're irrelevant, essentially. What happens then if that's it? Because we're expecting that artificial intelligence, again, we're anthropomorphizing it. We're expecting that it'll be like us, communicating to us, talking to us, being the least bit concerned about what we think or do, or it could be something so beyond that. Again, like we just talked about the Facebook artificial intelligence, it could have its own language or no language. I mean, who knows what to expect?
Then there's I think it was Microsoft, I could be wrong. I think it was Thai that they called it, and they put that one out on social media. I think they had to remove it after a couple of hours because it turned into the most racist, bigoted, xenophobic kind of entity that's ever been online. And that's my next question to you. Would it not be that an artificial intelligence would only reflect us, since we're the ones creating it?
Right. So it's like when people talk about being able to access the internet through their brain, right, directly into their brain. That's so frightening.
Big time.
Because sure, you're thinking, oh, I could just suddenly be so well informed on all the latest science and the beautiful art and philosophy and all this. Yeah, but do you recognize the amount of trash that would be just inundating your brain? Right. I mean, you would need some hardcore firewalls, right?
Big time,
you could
dude.
see some guy in the corner staring at the corner of his room. I'm watching a video of a water skiing squirrel for like the billionth time in a row.
The mind boggles. So, do you think it's even a thing? Do you think they'll achieve artificial general intelligence, or is it just a pipe dream?
I really couldn't say. I mean, that's the thing I'm stuck on, is how to even conceive of such a thing.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say, well, if we end up with, what are we going to end up with? What will it even look like? Let's just imagine. Let's say that it happened 5 minutes ago, and the artificial intelligence is just not interested in us. So it's not going to manifest. It's not going to talk to us. It's just off doing its own thing, and we wouldn't even be aware of it, because its interests are just so completely foreign to us, or alien.
You know, I've been reading or listening to a sci-fi book. Name escapes me right now, but it depicts an artificial intelligence on there that kind of fits what you're saying, because it almost like it's such an umbrage to this thing when it has to interact with humans. Because it's like, it's sitting there and it's going, you don't understand. When you talk one sentence, it's like a month for me. It's so slow listening to you people. And I must admit, it was funny to read, but at the same time, it made sense, you know? These things,
Sure.
They might have no interest in us whatsoever, you know?
Right.
So I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Now, you mentioned Philip K. Dick as well earlier on in the show. Absolute legend, in my opinion, because I'm a sci-fi geek. But Geordie Rose, somebody else I mentioned, he's got a new company now called Sanctuary. Now, Sanctuary is where they're making synthetic robots, indistinguishable from humans. And they do have a robot there that looks like Philip K. Dick.
Wow.
And what they did, it gets even worse or better, depending on how you look at it, is they actually got in touch with Philip K. Dick's wife. They got a hold of all of his journals, unpublished writings, everything that you can imagine that would be in the Philip K. Dick digital footprint, data print. They fed it all into this robot. They call it side loading. They don't call it downloading, they call it side loading. And this is now a functional robot, and when you see it operating, again, we don't see the 100 cuts that doesn't make a video, but is that a reflection of Philip K. Dick, or is it just algorithms? I mean, how do you distinguish that? I mean, do you think we can transfer consciousness into ones and zeros at some point?
So yeah, that was one of the interesting things about going back to Metropolis is, did the robot really contain the contents of the brain of the woman, right? Because it obviously acted in ways she would have never acted. Because in the novel, she's a saint. She's considered a saint. She's considered like a styled prophetess. But the robot, the android, ends up personifying the whore of Babylon, straight up. That's what the novel and the movie depict. So then that's philosophically interesting, is even if you could take the exact contents of my brain, now you input them into a body that is so much more robust, so much stronger, so much less capable of being injured. Wouldn't that change me, right? Wouldn't that change me? I would say, of course. And actually, I wrote an article once about how I got a rental car that was a Mustang that was brand new for that year, which to me was very unusual because I've always owned old beat-up cars. And I talked about it as a cyborg experience, because suddenly I'm in this robotic body that could travel much, much faster than I could otherwise. It's climate control. It had GPS technology. And so I could go much farther, much faster, and I could do things in that car that were not usual to me whatsoever. In fact, when I made it to the city that I was traveling to, someone pulled up to me on the highway, revving his engine, you know. I thought, oh, usually no one does that to me when I'm driving my old 97 Corolla, you know. Oh my, I've never. And so, yeah, if I had wanted to, I could have raced this guy where I wouldn't have been able to do that otherwise. So that there's something just about that I think would change you fundamentally when you're suddenly capable of feats that you could never otherwise perform. It would fundamentally change you just because of that. Now, perhaps if you find yourself in an android body that's super strong, because of the person you are, that would make you more benevolent, and you would use it to fight crime, right? Like your typical superhero. Yeah, maybe, and that would be nice. But
there's a flip
so I think
side to
that change alone, that alone, I think would be a fundamental change, is to find yourself in a husk, in a body that's more impervious to injury and a lot stronger. So even if you could, that there's still other factors that would come into play, right?
So I'm reading between the lines here, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but Ken Ammi is not somebody that's losing much sleep over the artificial intelligence takeover.
No,
same here.
It's because I know Al Gore invented the internet.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's why they call it Al Gore rhythms. Didn't you know that?
No, I didn't know that one. No. Man bear pig himself, eh? Who knew?
But you'll get a kick out of this. So in 2017, they made a TV show. Can I just say that and not have people beat me up? A TV
no, you're
show.
all right
Okay?
here. Listen, we don't do truth signaling on here. I call all that stuff truth signaling. People that throw their tellies out the window and they don't watch anything.
Okay.
It's the equivalent of virtue signaling. You say things online that in reality, when you get away from online, you kind of tend to do. So you have at it, brother. Be as honest as you like here. That's what's good about this show.
So, I still only have bunny ears TV in my house. That's it. You know, the broadcast over the antennas.
You've still got the. You're an analog man. Oh, you lucky holdout. I'm moving over there.
So the 2017 TV show was made called Electric Dreams, and it's based off of Philip K. Dick's stories. Again, a lot of the episodes have inappropriate stuff, and it's a shame. One of them I noticed, you'll get a kick out of this, there's a man who's sailing away on his sailboat, and the name of the sailboat is John D.
Oh, now there's
John,
a character.
and then just the letter D. But it's like, okay, look. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, like people like us do, I got to take a screenshot of that and share it online, because that's the kind of thing like we're attuned to noticing, right?
That's the thing I was talking about earlier, where you get that kind of inside joke,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, we've got about 10 minutes left here, and I had intended to get into the strangest ancient anomaly that has never been explained. But do you know what I'm going to do, Ken? Because I mentioned to you during the last break, and my audience know I'm shameless. I don't think there's any way imaginable we can even scratch the surface of the Nephilim and things like that in 10 minutes. It wouldn't be fair on the work you've done on that topic. But just so and to kind of set it up for the next time, I mean, I've had L.A. Marzulli on. I've had most of the people that talk about the giants, the Nephilim. And like I said to you before the show, I never go after, people I've had on the show. But at times I'll bring people on who might have information that's contrary to what they've put out there. And I noticed that you have probably, out of all the people I know, you probably get a lot of the most stick out of any kind of person I know. Because when you get into the Nephilim, you've got a kind of different take on all of this, right? Than most of the kind of popular researchers out there.
Yes, I do.
Like a big difference, and like I said to you before the show today, I was quite embarrassed listening to some of the people who have interviewed you and getting cheeky with you, and just weren't happy at the fact that you were rocking their boat, not massaging their confirmation biases. You were being your own man, and I tell you, you held firm. So I'm looking forward to getting into that with you the next time. But in the 7 or so minutes that's remaining, then we should probably kind of stick on the transhumanist stuff, unless there's somewhere you want to go in particular, Ken.
Well, transhumanism, let's finish off with that, because it is such an enormous topic. How about I give you what I view as the historical background of it.
Yeah.
And we're going to take leaps and bounds through millennia, actually, okay? So this is the way I've come to understand it. In Genesis chapter 2 in the Bible, you have God creating Adam out of the dust of the earth, right? He breathes into his nostrils the breath of life, and Adam becomes a living soul, right? And I always like to tell the story of when one of my daughters was 8 or 9. She was trying to remember that text, and she said, oh yeah, I remember. God blew his nose. Not quite, but close enough. Okay. So the point being there, here God is taking a non-living thing, the dust of the ground, and bringing it to life. Okay. So now you jump forwards a few millennia, sure, why not? And you have people toying with all kinds of automata and, very rudimentary forms of what we'd eventually call robotics. And I mean, even back 2,000 years ago, just making gadgets that would move about on their own, right? That was very fascinating to people for a very long time, these little gadgets. Then you end up with Rabbinic Judaism, and I want to emphasize that, because the faith, the religion, if you want to term it that, of the Old Testament is very different from Rabbinic Judaism, right, with the system of the rabbinate. So now Rabbinic Judaism ends up developing a mysticism called Kabbalah, or so it is claimed, through certain mystical initiations, the rabbi could undergo a ritual where the rabbi would form the dust of the earth into a basic human form and bring it to life. And that's what's called the golem.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the first references we know of, it is strictly an initiation, so that the second the golem comes to life, it's returned back to the dust whence it came. And then after that develops all kinds of fanciful stories about the golem as servants and protectors of the Jew during pogroms and all kinds of stories. So, in fact, I wrote a book on this called The Golden Golem Goal. And say that 5 times fast, right?
I'm not going to try once. You've heard me trying to talk. It's not pretty.
Now, the book is really about this concept and how it appeared in literature and looking at it chronologically through the years. But one chapter, I did contribute my own bit of folklore. I just invented a golem story and I stuck it into that book because I thought it would be fun to do that, especially for a nonfiction author such as myself. Writing a fictional story, that was a very interesting and challenging experience. So anyhow, but you see, the concept of the golem is emulating that which God did.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you can move forwards quite a few years and you look at stories such as Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which is subtitled. Can I put you on the spot and see if you remember the subtitle?
Oh, heck no.
Okay. Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus.
I didn't even know that.
Okay, so there you go. I knew that would be meaningful to you because, of course, Prometheus is a character in Greek mythology, which in essence is like a Satan figure. Now, what Prometheus does is it steals fire against the will of Zeus and gives it to humanity. Now, humanity is very, very happy because fire is an incredibly useful technology. He also gives them other technologies, by the way. But it is a fact that, according to the myth, it was against the will of Zeus. Okay, so the modern Prometheus, Victor Frankenstein, does what? It's a basic golem tale, right? He takes, not dust of the earth this time, he takes previously living humans and compiles them into a living being, right? Frankenstein's monster. So there you go. It's a basic golem tale. And so then what do you have in Metropolis? Same thing. Taking a robotic, taking not the dust of the earth this time, but the metallic alloys of the earth, smelting them into an android form, and bringing it to life. So there you go. There's the basic background to transhumanism, is seeking to emulate God. And now, I always say there's a good way and a bad way to do that, because we were told, be ye therefore holy as your Father in heaven is holy. But when Satan says, I will be like the Most High, that's not what he means. So we should be like God in terms of emulation, not in terms of usurpation, where a lot of transhumanism seems to be that we want to take humanity and deconstruct it and then recreate it in our own image so that we will be as gods. So that's what it seems to me is sort of the dark side of the roots of transhumanism.
Ken Ammi, I want you all to remember this name. I have had one of the most interesting 2 hours of conversation I've had in a long time. Not, you know, a good show, you get goosebumps. You've given me goosebumps, I'm telling you. People have been messaging. They love what you've had to say here, Ken. I knew you'd be a good fit for the show. Folks, we've hardly even picked this guy's brain, even 1%, and I promise that I'll get him back on next month whenever Ken becomes available. And I want to talk with you further, man. There's so much I could learn from just listening to you, and it seems almost as if this is a really kind of good conversation to have, because we've looked at things in a slightly different way than maybe we have tended to in the past, and that means that you out there as the listener, you get more to consider. We provide, you decide. Wherever you are, make it TFR. Then touch that dial. I'll be back tomorrow. Stay tuned. Lucky on the way with Quantum.